There is a kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with your body. You slept 8 hours. You woke up with a full cup of coffee. And yet, before you even step out the door, something in you is already drained. That low, quiet, grinding exhaustion. It is not physical. It is the weight of constantly managing what other people think of you. And if you have ever walked into a room already scanning for approval, or posted something online and sat there refreshing the page waiting for proof that someone validated you, then what I am about to share is going to change how you operate. Stay with me because this is not a motivational speech. This is a complete rewiring of how you relate to the world around you. Before we go further, if you are new here, this is Silent Strategist, where we break down the kind of thinking most people never encounter. We go deep. If that is what you are looking for, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Alright, let us get into it. The average person wakes up in the morning already behind. Not behind on work, not behind on money. Behind on something far more costly, their own attention. The first thing most people do when they open their eyes is pick up their phone. And in that single move, before they have even brushed their teeth, they have handed over the most valuable resource they possess, their focus, their emotional bandwidth, their morning peace. They have donated it freely and without hesitation to a feed full of strangers, opinions, and 100 things that have absolutely nothing to do with their actual life. And they do this every single morning, and then they wonder why they feel scattered, why they feel like they are always reacting to the world instead of directing it. Here's the truth most people are not willing to sit with. Most of your anxiety is self-inflicted, not because you are weak, not because something is wrong with you, but because you have been trained, deliberately, systematically trained, to care about things that should mean nothing to you. You have been trained to care about the opinions of people you barely know, trained to care about metrics that measure your worth in likes and follower counts. Trained to perform your life rather than live it, and the performance is exhausting. Because deep down, some part of you knows it is fake. Some part of you knows that the carefully edited, approval-seeking, conflict-avoiding version of yourself you are projecting is a costume. And you have been wearing it so long you have forgotten what your actual face looks like underneath. What I want to walk you through today is a different way of moving through the world. A philosophy that is not about giving up or checking out. It is actually the opposite. It is about becoming so grounded in yourself, so secure in your own inner world, that the noise outside simply stops having power over you. And in a world where almost every system around you is designed to keep you anxious and seeking external approval, a person who has achieved genuine inner freedom is, without exaggeration, dangerous. The philosopher we are drawing from today lived over 400 years ago. His name was Michel de Montaigne. And what this man figured out, sitting alone in a tower in France in the 1500s, is more relevant to your daily life right now than almost anything being published today. Not because he was a genius, though he was deeply intelligent, but because he was brutally honest about himself, about human nature, about the ridiculous theater of social life. And what he left behind is essentially a blueprint for psychological freedom. Montaigne had everything society told him should make him happy: wealth, status, a respected position as a magistrate, a family, a name that carried weight in powerful circles. By every external measure, he had made it. And he was miserable. Not dramatically miserable, just that quiet, creeping, suffocating kind of miserable where you realize your entire life belongs to other people. His schedule belonged to his duties. His energy belonged to the court. His mind belonged to the expectations and politics of the world around him. He was, in his own words, living on the outside of himself. At 38 years old, he walked away. He retreated to a round tower on his own estate, had an inscription carved into the ceiling beam, essentially a declaration that he was reclaiming himself, and he locked the door. He spent years there reading, thinking, and writing. Not writing grand manifestos or academic philosophy designed to impress scholars. He wrote about himself, his habits, his fears, his contradictions, his doubts. And in doing so, he accidentally created one of the most powerful psychological frameworks in human history. The first and most foundational idea he developed is what I want to call the back room. He said, imagine your mind is like a shop on a busy street. The front of the shop is open to the public. Customers walk in and out, they browse, they ask questions, they make demands. They leave a mess. Most people live entirely in the front of their mental shop. They are always responding to whoever just walked through the door. The news cycle walks in, they react. A passive-aggressive comment walks in, they react. A stranger's opinion on the internet walks in, they react. Their entire inner life is determined by whoever showed up that day. But Montaigne said there has to be a back room. A room at the back of the shop that is completely yours, no public access. No customers, no boss's expectations, no social media noise. In that room, you are not the employee, not the parent, not the person your friends think you are or your enemies think you are. You are just you, the raw, unperformed, unfiltered version. And his argument was simple. If you do not have that room, if you have let the world colonize your entire mental space, you will never have peace. Not because the world is too harsh, but because you gave it permission to move in. Think about how true that is right now. When is the last time you had a genuinely quiet thought that was not shaped by something you saw online? When is the last time you made a decision based entirely on what you actually wanted, not what looked right, not what would earn approval? For most people, that is a very uncomfortable question, because the honest answer is that it has been a while. The world has moved into the back room, and we need to evict it. The most common misunderstanding here is that this sounds like cold, selfish detachment. Like the goal is to stop caring about anything. That is not it. Montaigne was not cold. He was more engaged with life than almost anyone around him. The difference was that his engagement came from choice, not from fear. He participated in the world because he wanted to, not because he was terrified of what would happen if he did not. That distinction is everything, because here is what actually happens when you care too much about what people think. When your entire sense of self is built on external approval, you stop being a person and start being a performance. You say what people want to hear. You hold back your actual opinions. You laugh at things that are not funny. And slowly, quietly, the real you shrinks. It retreats so far into the background that you actually lose touch with what you genuinely think, feel, and want. You become a character playing yourself. And the brutal irony confirmed by psychology, lived by Montaigne, is that the more desperately you try to earn people's approval, the less they respect you. The harder you work to make people like you, the less they actually do. Human beings are wired to sense desperation. We detect neediness at an almost instinctual level. And when we detect it, we do not feel warmly toward that person. We feel a kind of vague discomfort. Think about the people in your life you genuinely respect. Are they the ones constantly fishing for validation? Or are they the ones who seem settled, who can state an unpopular opinion without looking around for backup, who can absorb a harsh comment without crumbling, who do not need the room to agree with them in order to feel okay? There is a gravity to that kind of person. A stillness that pulls people in. And it is rare, because most people are performing. When you meet someone who is not, it is magnetic. Montaigne called this belonging to oneself. The greatest achievement available to a human being, not conquest, not wealth, not fame, just the radical act of actually owning your own mind instead of leasing it to other people's opinions. And here is what he understood. When you finally stop chasing approval, approval tends to find you. Not because you started playing the game better, because you stopped playing it entirely. People who are not playing the game are trustworthy. Their opinion means something because you know they are not just telling you what you want to hear. If you are finding this useful, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I read everyone. And if this is the kind of thinking you needed to hear, share it with someone. You might be doing them a real favor. There is a principle that describes a phenomenon most people experience but never quite name. The harder you try to achieve certain things, the further away they get. The more obsessively you pursue happiness, the more miserable you become. The more desperately you try to control how people see you, the more out of control everything feels. We live in a culture that says if you want something, push harder. But this advice, which works for building skills or businesses, completely falls apart when applied to internal states and social dynamics. You cannot force yourself to be happy. You cannot grind your way to genuine confidence. Those things happen when you stop doing the thing that is blocking them. When you stop performing for approval, real confidence appears. When you stop trying to be interesting, you start being genuinely interested in the world, and that interest makes you naturally compelling. Montaigne did not set out to become one of the most read writers in Western history. He retreated from public life, wrote honestly for himself, and across 4 centuries his words found their way to millions of people who felt understood by a man they never met. The moment he stopped trying to be significant, he became significant. The practical application is what I call the art of the shrug, not a lazy shrug, not the shrug of someone who has given up. A shrug of a person who has decided what is and is not worth their attention. Your manager criticizes your work in front of the whole team, and it is not entirely fair. The old you spends the rest of the day replaying it, rehearsing your response, lying awake at 2 in the morning. The new you extracts whatever is actually useful from the criticism and lets the rest go. It does not enter the back room. Someone you were looking forward to hearing from goes quiet. The old version doubles down, checks the phone every 10 minutes, starts analyzing every previous conversation. The new version shrugs, assumes they are busy or not interested. Either reality is fine. Neither one changes what is actually going on in the back room. Neither changes the value of your own inner life. I want to be clear about something. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is loud. It is constantly announcing how little it cares, which is just another form of performing. Real indifference is quiet. It does not need an audience. It simply operates from a place of internal completeness. And that quietness, that absence of the need to prove anything, that is what people actually feel and respond to. Now, I want to talk about something Montaigne wrote about extensively: the relationship between the mask you wear and the actual person beneath it. He lived during one of the most dangerous periods in French history, religious wars where political miscalculation could get you killed. He navigated those years not by being relentlessly open in the way we use that word today, but by understanding the difference between what he lent to the world and what he kept for himself. He wrote, "We must lend ourselves to others, but give ourselves only to ourselves. Lend, not give. When you lend something, you keep ownership. You can take it back." Most people are not lending themselves to the world. They are giving themselves away completely. They are attaching their entire identity to their job title, to their relationship status, to their social circle. And when any of those things shifts, when the job ends, when the relationship breaks, they do not just lose a role. They lose themselves because they merged with the costume. Montaigne played his roles fully. He was a magistrate, a mayor, a husband, a father. He did not do these things half-heartedly. But he always knew the difference between the role and the person playing it. He wore each identity like a well-fitted coat, useful, appropriate for the occasion, but not fused to his skin. The coat comes off when you get home. Think about the last time you went through something genuinely difficult. A job loss, a breakup, a major failure. How hard did it hit? And is there a chance that part of the reason it hit so hard is not just because the thing was painful, but because you had merged with it so completely that losing it felt like losing your identity? That is what happens when you give yourself to a role rather than lend yourself to it. The shift Montaigne is proposing is not emotional numbness. It is maintaining a layer of self beneath every role, every relationship, every achievement. A self that does not depend on any of those things to exist. Hit the like button if this is landing for you. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. And leave a comment with the idea that hit you hardest. I want to know what is resonating. Here is another piece of Montaigne's philosophy that is both simple and almost impossible for most people to actually practice. He had a motto, a question he reportedly had engraved on a medallion he wore. The question, what do I know? not as a statement of ignorance, as a genuinely open question, a permanent posture of intellectual humility. He was one of the most widely read men of his era, and his foundational stance was, I might be wrong, always, about everything. In a culture that rewards certainty and punishes doubt, that is almost radical. We live in a world where admitting you do not know something is treated as weakness, where changing your mind is called inconsistency. So people lock themselves into positions. They build their identities around their beliefs. And then they have to defend those beliefs forever. Not because the evidence demands it, but because backing down would feel like losing part of themselves. The belief becomes the identity. Any challenge to the belief is an attack on the person. This is the most exhausting game you can play, because the world is complex and changing and full of information you do not have yet. If your self-worth depends on being right, you spend your life in a defensive crouch, fighting off every new idea that threatens your current map of reality. You never learn anything genuinely new. You stay wrong and get more confident about it. The person who says, I do not know, genuinely, openly, without embarrassment, is in a position of tremendous power. The power of someone who is not afraid to be corrected, who can sit across from fierce disagreement and stay curious instead of defensive. When you are not defending a position, you can actually listen. You can change your mind when the evidence warrants it and feel no shame because your ego was not riding on the outcome. Montaigne said the person most likely to discover the truth is not the most confident one. It is the one most willing to look foolish, most willing to ask the obvious question, most willing to be the person in the room who says, wait, I actually do not understand this. Can someone explain it again? That person accumulates real understanding, while the person performing confidence stays comfortable and stays stuck. Now let us talk about solitude. Not as a personality type, not introvert versus extrovert, but as a psychological practice, a survival skill. Montaigne's argument was not that being alone is superior to being with people. It was that if you cannot be alone with yourself, you are not free, you are dependent. And dependency of whatever kind is vulnerability. Think about what happens when you are alone and the phone is off and there's no TV, no podcast, no playlist. What rises in those first few minutes? For most people, something uncomfortable, a restlessness, an urge to fill the silence with anything. And if you sit with that discomfort long enough, which most people do not, you start to encounter your actual thoughts, the real state of your inner world, unfiltered by distraction. Most people are running from that encounter. The scrolling, the constant background noise, the endless content, a lot of it is avoidance. A way of staying in the front of the shop so you never have to go into the back room and find out what is actually there. Because sometimes what is back there is uncomfortable. The quiet reveals that you are in the wrong job, that a relationship has stopped working, that there is a version of your life you actually want to be living that you keep burying under layers of distraction. Blaise Pascal, influenced by Montaigne, wrote that humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly alone in a room. This was in the 1600s, before smartphones, before the 24-hour news cycle. Imagine how true it is now. Build your capacity for solitude. Practice being alone until you genuinely enjoy it, until your own company is something you look forward to. You stop spending time with people who drain you just because you cannot stand being alone. You stop tolerating disrespect just because the alternative is silence. You become selective, expensive. Your time and attention stop being cheap, and people feel the difference. There is something about a person who has chosen to be around you, who clearly does not need your company but genuinely wants it, that commands a completely different kind of respect. Now we come to the piece that is the most powerful and the hardest to absorb. Everything we have talked about rests on one foundation: the acceptance that you are going to die. I know, stay with me. Montaigne was surrounded by death his entire adult life. The plague swept through France repeatedly. He lost his closest friend, his father, several siblings, and 5 of his children. Death was not a concept for him. It was a constant presence. And for years, he was terrified of it. He slept with a light burning because the darkness reminded him of the void. But something shifted. He started sitting with the reality of death rather than running from it, not in a morbid way, but in a clear-eyed, what is actually true here kind of way. And gradually, the terror softened. Not because he found some comforting story about what comes after, but because he realized that his fear of death was actually a fear of life, that the person who is terrified of the end becomes rigid and cautious and safe in the middle. They make conservative choices. They hold back. They care enormously about reputation and status because on some level, those things feel like a buffer against insignificance. Then he had a near-death experience. Thrown from his horse, his people thought he was dead. When he came back to consciousness, he wrote that it felt gentle, like letting go of a heavy weight. He realized that the anticipation of dying, the dread, the avoidance, the clinging, was far more painful than the actual event. When you sit with your own mortality, not morbidly, but honestly, your priorities clarify. The things that used to seem enormous start to look small. The humiliating moment at a party, the rejection from someone you barely know, the failed project, the opinion of someone whose respect you have been chasing. These things lose their power when you hold them against the actual scale of a life and its inevitable end. Not in a nihilistic way, but in a clarifying way. This particular thing I've been torturing myself over does not actually matter. So why am I giving it my best hours? The person who has genuinely made peace with their mortality is almost impossible to manipulate. You cannot threaten them with embarrassment. You cannot control them through fear of rejection. They become ruthless in the best possible way. Ruthless with their time, ruthless with their attention. Clear about what actually deserves their energy and what earns a quiet, unhurried, unbothered shrug. This is not pessimism, it is the opposite. The person who has accepted their finitude does not drag themselves through life in a fog of dread. They move through it with a specific kind of calm urgency. The urgency of someone who has noticed how beautiful and brief the whole thing is, and decided not to waste it on things that do not matter. Not to spend their precious hours worrying about what people they do not even respect think of their choices. And this is why Montaigne's final conclusion is so unexpected and so powerful. After all the philosophy, all the years in the tower, his final prescription was not for greatness. It was for ordinariness, not mediocrity. Ordinariness. The small, textured, fully felt pleasures of being alive. The meal eaten slowly and actually tasted. The conversation with a friend that has nowhere to go. The morning that belongs entirely to you. He was one of the most accomplished men of his era, and he wrote with genuine reverence about walking through his garden, about the simple pleasure of a perfectly ripe piece of fruit. He was not pretending to find meaning in small things. He had genuinely arrived at the understanding that the big things, the status, the influence, the legacy, are often cages. The celebrity cannot walk down the street. The powerful person cannot trust the people around them. The ordinary person, the one who has not been turned into a symbol or a brand or a performance, has a kind of freedom that all the influence in the world cannot buy. He wrote that governing nations and winning battles look impressive from a distance, but living well from day to day, treating the people around you and yourself with honesty and care, that is actually the harder thing and the more valuable thing. It is easier to be heroic for 10 minutes than to be decent for 50 years. It is easier to chase the spectacular than to be fully present in the ordinary. And the spectacular, when you finally get close enough to it, tends to disappoint, because it was never really about the thing you were chasing. It was about the aliveness you were looking for. And that aliveness was always here in the small moments, waiting for you to stop sprinting past it. So here is where everything lands. You build the back room. You construct, mentally and deliberately, a private inner space that belongs entirely to you, and that you do not hand over to the world. The world gets your work, your kindness, your skill, your effort. The world gets the front of the shop. But the room in the back, your actual values, your actual relationship with your own life, that stays yours. You practice the shrug. The unfair criticism goes into the shop. You take what is useful, and the rest does not make it through the door. The failure happens in the shop. You learn from it. You do not merge with it. You wear your roles loosely. You are excellent at what you do without becoming what you do. You love the people in your life without building your identity on their continued presence. You play the character fully while knowing you are not the character. You embrace the I do not know. You stop defending positions your ego got attached to and start pursuing what is actually true. You become the person who can change their mind in public and feel nothing but curiosity about what they will think next. You build your tolerance for silence. You practice being alone until you genuinely enjoy it, until the quiet is not threatening but clarifying. And you make peace with the fact that all of this is temporary, not as a reason to despair, as a reason to stop wasting it, as a reason to bring your actual self to the actual moment you are actually in, instead of spending your real hours building a performance for imaginary judges. The world will keep screaming, the feed will keep refreshing, the expectations will keep multiplying. None of that is going away. But you can build something they cannot reach. A place inside yourself that is yours alone, the place where none of the noise has jurisdiction. And from that place, you can step back out into the world, do the work, love the people, engage fully, but on your terms, from your own ground, with the key to the back room in your pocket and the very clear knowledge that no one else is getting in. That is the philosophy. That is what one man sitting alone in a tower 400 years ago figured out and left behind for us. The opinions of other people are not a currency worth spending your life chasing. Your attention is the real currency. And you have been spending it on things that were never worth the price. If this video shifted something for you, share it with one person today. Not for the views, for the conversation. Some of the best ideas spread the way Montaigne's did. One person, one quiet moment of recognition at a time. This is Silent Strategist. Stay grounded, stay strategic, and I will see you in the next one.